we have 90 minutes. So how we have divided the session, I will be speaking for 45 minutes, maybe not speaking for 45 minutes. I try to give some time for question answer. Then Preeti, my colleague, she will take over. And so what I'm going to look at is mostly looking at the artifacts, and some of it I think Karen already mentioned in her talk, that how technologies are gendered, so they embody the gender in certain ways. And Preeti is going to look at more at the usage. Preeti is going to look at more at the access, at the consumption stage of technology. Now, I think the global scenario is kind of clear to you, what's happening with women in technology, like how many women are coming to do technology, and what kind of impact that has on the experiences that we have with technology. And here again, I'll start with sort of setting the context the way I did in the morning, that I'm talking about that we need to look beyond the question of access and see how different groups of people can participate in the technologies that we are building, and what are the hindrances for them, what are the barriers for them to participate. So looking, access is, I'm not saying that access is not important, but access is just one small part of it. Participation is much larger context or concept than looking at just access. So talking about the larger context, I already mentioned some of this in the morning, that how Sustainable Development Goals says one of the Sustainable Development Goals is gender equality and women's empowerment, and there how ICTs are considered to be one of the most important game changer, like how they would be playing a very important role. And incidentally also, this is a quote from one of our ministers in the 59th session of Commission of the Status of Women in the United States nations. So he was talking about that how enabling use of ICT tools in advancing gender equality and empowerment of women would be a game changer in this process. So again, what I said in the morning, that both of them are talking about giving women access to the technology. But before we even get into the participation part, that's the last point is very recent. It's in 2017, which shows actually the status of access to digital technologies when it comes to women. It's almost so women have 33% of Indian women have access to any of these digital technologies in comparison to 67% of their male counterpart. So it's almost half. So now what do we do? The problem of access is not solved, and those who have access, are they even participating? So it's a double-edged problem. Now, if this is the context we are looking at in Indian cases, I want to bring it, I will basically pick up where Karen sort of left about talking about a few cases of technology. Some are old technologies, some are new technologies which are now being developed, and how, in what ways gender sort of gets into the way of technology design. So that's mostly will be the focus of my talk. So before we get into the cases, there are, as I said in the morning, there are hope is to give you some of those frameworks to operate with. Like how do you get to understand that how gender gets into technology design, or why it gets into the technology design question. So this is actually many of us who teach use this reading. So some of my students who are here might be already aware of this paper that I'm referring to in by Langdon Winner. It's a seminal article which is written in 1980, and the title of the paper is called "Do Artifacts Have Politics?" So the question is looking at that technology design or technology as such, artifacts, it could be a flyover, which could be railways, any of these big technology, small technological tools that you use, they all have some sort of politics. Now, what do I mean by this? Like when I say that artifacts have politics, have anybody want to take a chance? What do I mean by it? Yes, you can read what is written on the first point. That's pretty much what it sums up. So politics not in the way we understand what political parties or government and all that. Of course, those are also part of the politics. But what we mean here, that technology by design creates or cater to some kind of interest or some group's interest. And when it sort of caters to a particular group's interest, it has the potential to exclude others. And this creates a boundaries of inclusion and exclusion for different groups of people. And that's what I mean by politics of design. So when we are creating this, that's what he's saying, that it regularly produces results counted as wonderful breakthrough by some social interest and crushing the others. And that's exactly what Karen was trying to address in her talk, that how we don't do sometimes these things intentionally. It's not that the designers or these evil people are trying to trying to settle scores with women or any other group. It's just that because we don't think about many of these issues, we continuously keep producing technologies which kind of exclude people, or sometimes technology is also not the reason of exclusion. So that's something also I want to sort of clarify, that as we said in the morning again, that we cannot have, or we want to move away from this causal relationship between technology and social impact. So we cannot even say that if technology alone cannot empower us, technology alone cannot exclude us either. So sometimes what technological artifacts do, that's the politics that we are talking about, they kind of reproduce the existing inequalities that exist in our society. Because we don't try to address those inequalities while we are designing these technologies. So then in the context of gender, that's our theme today, then what are the two questions that we need to ask? Or we start asking when we are sort of trying to evaluate what technologies are creating gendered exclusion or gendered experiences for that matter. First is, what are the impacts that new technologies have on women's life? And if they have different experiences or create different experiences for men and women, do they embody this in their material attributes? So it creates by default a different experience for men and women. So these are the two questions that are crucial when you're looking at the question of gender, technology, and inclusion or exclusion. Now, there are two ways in which you can think of this relationship, gender, technology, and technology. First, and this is what I'm saying, that when you are looking at technologies, we'll also try to get to this when we are doing the more hands-on sessions at the end of the day, that how do you evaluate existing technologies to ask these questions. First is gender in technology, and the second one is gender of technology. So I'm drawing on feminist science and technology studies scholar called Faulkner. So she uses these two terms. And so the first term means gender in technology, that when you're trying to find out the material attributes, so what does a particular technological feature sort of attributes or creates this kind of gender experiences. So I'll talk about those cases, but let me just explain the concepts here. And the second one is about gender of technology. So sometimes when we create technologies where we draw on our regular, or everyday experiences, that I think one of you mentioned in the last session, the problem of reinforcement, that we reinforce some of those associations or stereotypes that we have, like when Karen asked that what do you think that women do most online? Many of us said thoughts, shopping. That also sort of you associate women with shopping all the time. But if you actually look at data, I think men would be doing more online shopping than women. But it's just the way we associate the kind of gendered behavior that we think that actually happens in our everyday life. We try to sort of map that onto the technologies that we want to build. So if you want to build an e-commerce platform, you would already have some pre-existing notion of what women would be interested in, and then that's what you would put in the design itself. So this is what I mean by gender by association. So it's not inherently, it's this whole thing that anything that has a pink color must be made for women. I mean, there is no inherent relationship between women and pink, right? I mean, it's not that we are born pink, or not just all women would love pink, right? But it's by association that you create this relationship between pink and women, that men will think three times before buying anything which is pink, because it's sort of, disassociate themselves from their own gender. So this is what I mean by gender of technology, that you create these associations over regular use patterns. Now, let me sort of tell you what are these cases. So as I said, there will be some old technologies, there are some new technologies that you look at. First one is actually, as you can see, it's in 1993. So it's a case of airbags that was first introduced in the US market, and what they found that the airbag design was, as Karen again talked about, that how designs are already, all these usabilities are sort of tested on men, and then you miss out a large uh, part of the population. That these airbags were designed with only, not just male, only white male in their imagination, or that's what they tested on. So when they actually came in, it had actually a lot of fatal, repercussions for women, and also men of different races who did not fit into that white male sort of a configuration of a car user or a driver. And one of the reasons is not just that women did not use, but you don't think of women as driving the cars. So most of the time your imagination of a driver is that of a male, and hence you don't think of them as your ideal users. And what happens, you build airbags which did not work for women at all. So this is a typical case of gender in technology. So it actually discriminates an artifact, which by default, by design, discriminate against women. Yeah.
So let's say 80% of car owners in the US are white male.
Yes.
Doesn't that justify that design for the company?
Yes, I'll come to that. That's a very good question. It actually then, what you're asking comes to the second case that I'm talking about, which is the LinkedIn case. This was reported in 2016. So if you search for, let's say, this is exactly what this says. If you search for a woman's name, this is Stefan, it will auto-correct it to Stefan. And they actually tested it. LinkedIn has a proprietary algorithm, right? So you can't get access to that algorithm. But what they figure out by just doing it again and again with different female names, that will auto-correct to a male name, or whatever the closest name is. So they reported, they blogged about it. And as a response, LinkedIn looked at their algorithms and they fixed it. So again, where was this coming from? That most of the LinkedIn users which were looking for jobs or those kind of jobs were men. And after this, there is another research which I'm not citing here, is that they found through some of this kind of, looking at the use cases, because they can't get into the algorithm, that most of the time the highest paid jobs or higher paying jobs were advertised to male users a lot more than the same women of same qualification. So if, for example, she is a computer scientist, the kind of jobs she would be advertised for, or she would be getting access to, as in comparison to her male counterpart, would be a lot less good. So these are also comes from the kind of data that you get. So the data is of course underrepresented and by women, and hence if you make the data as the basis on which you are making this design, your design is going to sort of reinforce those biases, right? Same thing happens if you look at credit score algorithms. Because women, actually, if you look at the history, credit history, women have not got a lot of loans because they don't have property, they don't have collaterals and stuff like that. They own less assets. So they are historically been not a very ideal category of population to give loan to. And because they are underrepresented in this data, if you use credit scoring algorithms to decide who is the best person profile for giving loans, women always will have a less score. And this is why it is more important to understand this point and how it is different, like the first one that we are talking about and the second one. Because first of all, you could think of these designers not thinking about a certain kind of users profile. Now, as we are moving on with the technology, many of the decisions are automated now. I'm looking at a large data sets and some machine learning algorithms are supposed to calculate this. So if you don't think of these things very early stage of your design, you are actually going to run into a bigger problem. Because your basis at which it's an automated decision, right? So, and the basis is data. So the kind of data you will feed, the kind of decision you're going to get. And that's the whole problem, because as she already showed, at a global scale, the data will always have a very skewed representation of men and women. Okay, now the second case that I was talking about. Again, the first one is, first two are pretty old cases. So micro-ovens, when it was first introduced, it was actually meant for bachelor men who could just heat up their food because they're alone, staying alone, and they don't have a woman to cook for them. As soon as they figured out that they are going to launch it for women, they had to sort of insert all those cooking possibilities. So the design was such a way when they thought of women, because men would never cook or men should never cook. So this is again, it's not that what microwave you have now, there is nothing gendered in the microwave. Men can also cook, women can also cook with the same artifact. But here the association is only because at one point it was thought to be a product which should cater to women also, that cooking was inserted. So this is what I mean by association, the pink example that I was giving, right? That there is nothing natural about men not being able to cook, or they have the same abilities that women have that is required to cook. So, but it's just expected that they would not cook, they will only heat up. Second one is again the smart homes example, that it's early 90s when first smart home prototypes were created. The kind of innovation that took place in that domain were mostly looking at men's use of this technology. So the kind of gendered labor that men do, only those were sort of innovated on. So you try to bring in this smart home technologies only to do things that men would usually do. So women's work at home were mostly negated. The question here could be that, okay, now that we have thought about this is very early, right? Now smart home technologies do take care of a lot of work that women do. Actually, there is, when I met you, I went to that STS conference also in Sydney. So there was one person who presented a new anthropological study on smart homes now in Australia. And they were looking at how the gender division of labor that was expected to sort of improve, or that was promoted, that it would improve if you have smart home technologies. Women will have more time for themselves if you have these technologies doing their work. What they figured out, this is her finding, that as a result, what has happened, men have whatever little that they used to do at home, they don't do at all. Their only job now in smart homes is to maintain. So if the technology stops working, then they'll go and fix it. Everything else is now a woman's job. So they have to manage that all the smart home technologies that they have at home to do their work. So nobody is taking the burden off them. And what has happened, so whatever men were helping with before, the excuse is that you have a technology to take care of it now, so you don't need me anymore. So this is how by association, there is this inherent association that sort of goes on, and we can't break it with sometimes even bringing in technology there. There needs to be something more. The last example, which is kind of tricky, so I didn't know where should I put it in the gender in or gender off. So it's a combination, so it's the last case that I'm going to talk about. So is there anybody who doesn't know this what to Beck? So maybe I am not the right person to talk about it, having so many computer scientists in the room. But it's just to put it in a very simple way that this is a word embedding framework which use NLP. Maybe you should talk about it and not me. So they basically take the data, large data set are put into it, and they match two words in terms of their proximity to each other. So for example, if you put man and there is another word which is in that data, which is king, so man and king would sort of go in together well. The pairing would be more appropriate pairing. And if you have a woman, appropriate pairing would be, for example, queen. So this is how it works, and it works with machine learning tools. And so one of the studies that I'm sort of referring to, so this images would also be available to you. You can look up these studies. So one of the things that it looks at, they find out that the data is so skewed that they sort of reproduce this gender stereotypes we have. So they put man and they put computer programming. So if you do the occupational categories and put men and women, so men got computer programming and women got homemaker. And there is actually a bunch of lists which I could not put because I did not have the space or also the time. So women had the pairing would work. Women would get homemaker, nurse, receptionist, librarian, socialite. And if you, the same category would be if homemaker, maestro for men, skipper, protege, philosopher, captain. So this is how they would map these words together. And again, it's not that the algorithm itself does this pairing. It's again comes from the data. That the data that they are operating on is something that is already underrepresented or represent women and men in certain lines. And it continue to reproduce these stereotypes that already exist out there. And by reproducing this stereotype, it actually gets embedded into the design itself. So unless and until you fix this algorithm against the underrepresentation or against the skewed data, it will actually, by design, will keep discriminating against women. So that's why I said it's a case of both, that it's gender of technology and which gets embedded in the design itself. Now, I don't have a lot of time left. So now, okay, all these cases that is. So that's what I wanted to say. So the point, it's not, I think maybe also the way I put it, is that it is not used to predict people's occupation. So let's say you are using this tool to see how you have, let's say I have this group of participants here, right? If I am using this tool to figure out what could be your background, like what do you do in generally in life, right? So because this kind of mapping is already done, so if I feed this data on the basis of the existing data, it will predict exactly the stereotype that already exists. So a woman's probability of being identified as a homemaker would be a lot higher than a man being identified as a homemaker. So it's not just you are using it to predict people occupation. It can be just a sentence as well. That if there is if I find that in a sentence there is this word homemaker, and the sentence can be in a fiction book, right? If I find the homemaker, I will look for the woman because that's how it has been already mapped. I think that's the point. So it's not used to predict people's occupation. This is a tool which is used across domain. And I was trying to give you an example through the occupation that these are the kind of stereotypical mapping which is done, which comes not nothing. It comes from the data in this particular case. And exactly the point that you raised, that it is pretty obvious that more women are homemakers than men. But the point is, it doesn't seem very obvious to the technology. If it's so obvious, then the technology, when we are designing this technology, these obvious factors should be already accounted for, right? That I should know that if this is what I'm going to do, it will have an adverse effect. I am going to reproduce the same problem that already exists. Does that sort of answer your question? Alright. So now the question is that how do we tackle this real world problem? So real world problem that there is a gender inequality, right? She also talked about it. We all know it. I mean, especially if you live in India, you can't ignore the fact that there is a gender inequality. Now, if that problem already exists, can we, what I started with, can we just make statements or can we just say that if we give access to technology, if we give women access to technology, the rest of the problem will be solved? It will not be, because again, technology will mirror the society in which it is going to be used. So that's exactly where I started with. That having access to technology will not be able to solve women's or to achieve women's empowerment if all these problems are getting embedded. Because if you don't think about it, if you think that access to technology will make women empowered, this is what happens. These are the cases. That's what I was talking about. The gender in technology. That's something which inherently deters you to use it because of your gender, and something which does not inherently deters you because of your gender, but it has an association. It is by association it's considered to be better for one gender and not better for the other gender. Now, what are the then from here? I'll just to wrap it up. Where do we then go? Like, what are the questions that we need to ask for when we are either evaluating existing technology design or we are trying to build something for our own? These are questions that I thought would be very important for you to, going forward. So, what values about gender relation that exist in society, and how these values are actually getting embedded into our technology design? And if they are getting embedded, what consequences it would have for women or maybe other gender minorities? So now, if you are asking that if you start this, so if this is the steps that you follow, then you will not just solely rely on data. When you write an algorithm, you will already think that my data will be skewed. So I cannot, as Professor Reddy was saying, that I cannot just afford to be gender neutral, because when I try to be gender neutral, I actually become more gender. Because my society is not gender neutral. So my technologies can never be gender neutral. And if we start from there, then you consciously try to think about it, that am I actually reproducing those gender inequalities that exist in a more maybe amplified way, or I am trying to actually shift those gender inequalities that exist by my technology design. And only when you think of that question, this whole statement that we started with, that give women more access to technology, like as I said, 33% women have access to or possess any mobile technologies versus 67% women, we can then think of that, should we first think of giving them access, or even those 33% who have access to it, how are their experience different? And that's when I think it will sort of tie down to what Karen says, that missing women. So women are also missing out. So why should they be even part of something that does not even take care of them or their needs or their experiences? So it's sort of, it's a recursive relationship that sort of follows. So maybe going forward, we can keep these questions in mind and when we're looking at concrete cases of technologies or even trying to develop technologies on our own. I'll just stop here. Does anybody have any question? These are the reading list. Yeah. But that is exactly the point I'm talking about. These are the code.
Came back to me
So
again
one of
and
the
again
problems
during
with
the
the
entire lecture.
for
Is the
example,
problem really with the algorithm and not the technology? Or
So
is the
the
problem really with how we try to interpret the results of any, let's say, processing that takes place within the self-contained technology itself? For example, the word-to-vec, I mean, the program or the instance you have. Let's say I wanted to research on the inherent biases in English literature. So I feed a huge volume of, let's say, literature from like the Victorian age, like English novels, into this thing, and then it comes out with the result that marriage to woman is the same as, let's say, vicar is to midwife. Now, the power dynamics in that is very obvious. Vicar, powerful man, head of the house, also governs a small territory. Midwife, a sort of a, subordinate role, has more to do with like maternity and then. Sure, so there is a bias, right? But in this case, it served my purpose. My purpose was to discover the biases in English literature, and then I got the result. So is the problem with the algorithm? It's like saying, I have made a mirror. The purpose of the mirror is to reflect society as it is, or me, I am as I am. And I hold the mirror in front of myself, and then I say, oh look, this mirror is showing me that some things about me are not perfect. I should change the mirror. Is the solution changing the mirror, or is the mirror actually doing its job? And the problem is with me drawing the conclusion from what I see in the mirror that I should be what the mirror looks like. Just to give, and also something to say about what, I had a question for you when you talked about the algorithm that was actually separating the black aspirants from, let's say, Caucasians. In the data set, was the race of the applicants made explicit, or did it just come to be that the applicants who filtered out were actually black? Because that matters. Because if the race was not made explicit.
So there are proxy variables that can give you race. Like I used to work for a bank.
And of course, this becomes very
predicting
complex
who
topic
to give
for
credit. So generally, you're not supposed to use something like gender for making such discrimination. But there are proxy variables like where you live,
even then this problem
or
is
what you do for a job.
and it was not because
But that's a correlation, right? So here's the
example. It's not people were trying to kill women, right? It's just they did not think about it. That's what comes, this is what comes back to you at the age of machine learning with word to vector. You don't think of women as drivers. It's the same thinking that gets reflected in the airbag as well as in the word to vector. Because you associate women with a particular kind of role. And that's the point I'm trying to make. So it's not about, whether, so it's not, as I said earlier also, we cannot think of technology either as transforming our life or empowering us. We should not also take technology as a villain here. It's not that it is doing all the wrong things for us. It's how we understand what is the potential of the technology and then use it accordingly. And then think of how technology can empower us and are we taking care of all the other factors when we are thinking about technology to be empowering? If we are not, then we might actually exclude people while our intention is to include them. That's the point I think would be I would sort of conclude.
And to address the example you took of vicars and midwives, there is a difference between looking at data as a purely academic pursuit and using the data to actually do something good. So all the examples.
The problem is with when we derive a wrong conclusion as to where we should use the data.
No. That's the thing, right? So most of the examples that are given, we as humans interpret the data and say, this looks right, this looks wrong. But that is not what happens in the industry. What happens in the industry is that machine learning algorithms, they make the decisions based on what they learn without any supervision.
And I ask that, I think what this time point is shirking responsibility and leaving it to the machine saying that this is what it says.
If there is human oversight involved, then
when you're actually writing an algorithm, you actually tell what exactly you should do.
Yes.
right? So you are giving instructions to the computer saying that this has to be done in this
There
way.
is another big problem with
Yeah.
conflating algorithms in the traditional sense with anything related to machine learning or artificial intelligence. Those two are completely different. I highly recommend this video by CGP Grey for artificial intelligence. It's really mind blowing and you'll be really worried. It will give you existential crisis, so watch it after 3 days.
Alright, so that exactly brings me to the end of my 45 minutes. Thinking, over to you.